what I love about sports gambling, and there are many things, but ultimately it's a probabilistic way of thinking, right? And I'm going to talk about this in the context of Georgia and Alabama because it factors in with the way that I am going to bet. Now, you're much better at math than me. Sal is much better at math than me. But
that's
I tried.
debatable.
Yeah,
That's debatable given how Sal's bet so far this season
Sal's betting.
with my removal from Fox Bet Live. So.
But what I try to teach my boys all the time is to avoid, it's fine if you're doing it for humor's sake or whatever else. Like we had a big debate about who the best looking girl is in 1980s movies. And I just categorically argued today on the radio show, we just finished this, that for my purposes, Allie on Karate Kid was like the Queen Van Damme, right? The femme fatale of the entire 1980s women movie canon. Now there are other nominees: Sloane Peterson on Ferris Bueller, Phoebe Cates, Fast Time at Ridgemont High, Kelly LeBrock in Weird Science, Wendy Peppercorn in Sandlot. I know that's a 90s movie, but I'm giving it.
Yeah, that's not 80s.
Jennifer Grey in Dirty Dancing, Winnie in Wonder Years. There were a bunch. I said Princess Leia on Jabba's lap in the bikini, which was an incredible moment for all males out there. But like having fun with like this is definitive answers, whatever. But in general in life, think probabilistically, right? And so tying it in with college football and the way that I think about gambling, I am on Georgia -2.5. And I'm also on the under in this game. So for everybody out there, Georgia -2.5 and the under. And the reason why I like Georgia is, Furman, I've watched Georgia play all year. There are 14 different sample sizes that we have to analyze the Georgia Bulldog football team. For 13 of those games, what has been reflected in that sample size is this is an elite level defense that is reflective, one of the best defenses that we've seen in modern era in college football. For one quarter against Alabama, second quarter, people forget, yes, the score ended up 41-24, but Georgia was up 10-0 in that game in the second quarter, Furman, and then everything fell apart. They gave up more points in the second quarter than they had given up in the entire season in any game. So I think Georgia is going to fix what ailed them in that game. I think that Kirby Smart and the Bulldogs are going to win this game. I believe that they are better than Alabama, more skilled on the offensive and defensive lines. Bama is better at the quarterback position, which can make you a little bit nervous if you are gambling here. But I believe the Bulldogs are going to exorcise the demons from 1980, going all the way back to when they last won their national championship. I believe they win, and I think a big part of this, college football, uniquely in the world of sports with big audiences, does not see very many rematches. And so your average college football fan expects that whatever happens in one game is going to be replicated in another one, unlike, say, an NFL fan or a college basketball fan or certainly an NBA fan where you see rematches all the time. NHL, this would apply as well. Every game is a unique subset of what would happen in a 1,000-minute game. I think Georgia's the better team. I think they win tonight and the under hits. I'm going Bulldogs 24-17. What say you, Furman?
Yeah, I like Georgia. I'm on Georgia as well. I bet them on the money line, so I'm not sure if that's the kiss of death for us agreeing on the game, but I think you make a ton of valid points talking about these teams. And when you look at gambler's fallacy amongst confirmation bias and a lot of other psychological terms we can use to describe things, to your point, I think it's very hard for a college football fan that watched Georgia play Alabama barely more than a month ago, and Alabama moved the football, with relative ease for the better part of 3 quarters. To your point, they did have that 24-point explosion in the second quarter, and other than that, the game was relatively within reach. But when you're looking at today's game, and I think this is a fascinating number, when you look over, I think it's the last 4 or 5 matchups, Georgia has either led or been tied with Alabama for more than 70% of gameplay. They just haven't been able to seal the deal and get over the hump. So you try and figure out how you quantify that psychological barrier, whether it's Kirby Smart and his coaching staff figuring out how to kill Alabama when they're down and step on the throat. If it's Stetson Bennett, you're not getting stuck in his own self-doubt if things don't go the way Georgia imagines on the opening drive or two. So there are so many unique variables in this equation. But I think what's even further to support your point is people find it so hard to grasp the fact that, hey, look, because Team 8 beat Team B on any given Saturday or any given Sunday, that Team B, who lost that first matchup, can somehow still be favored in that next matchup. But when you dig into this one, not only do I think Georgia has a chance to rectify what's gone wrong, Alabama, from a personnel perspective, isn't close to the same football team that they were back then. You've now lost John Mechie III, who was your biggest possession receiver, who represented nearly 100 catches for Bryce Young in this Alabama offense, especially on third and intermediate. You weren't looking for Jamison Williams on deep shots. It was Mechie operating underneath, whether he was in the slot or split out wide. You're down your top cover corner in Josh Jobe, which wouldn't seem like a big deal for Alabama, given that Georgia doesn't have a ton of threats that scare you on the outside. But now everybody has to step up, and Jalen Armour-Davis is far from 100%. He was in and out of the Cincinnati game. You're looking at an Alabama offensive line who, yes, they're going to get their right guard and their right tackle back in the mix, but who knows how healthy they are 9 days removed from a Cincinnati game they were unable to finish. And while all of us want to talk about Alabama's game plan being by design, and I really believe that coming from someone who bet that game under the total and Brian Robinson over his rushing yards, that they were going to run against the lighter box of the Bearcats. Well, that's not going to be a luxury. So if you're Georgia, in my opinion, you're selling out to make Alabama one-dimensional. You're trying to scheme ways to bracket Jamison Williams, and you're almost going, you know what, Nick Saban, Bill O'Brien, and Bryce Young, if you're going to beat us, you're going to need to do it left-handed, and it's got to be Jaleel Billingsley. It's got to be Slade Bolden and the cast of other Alabama receivers. So I'm with you that I think Georgia finally gets over the hump. And I'll go one step further, and this isn't the reason that you base a business decision on this by any stretch of the imagination. If Georgia can't win here, Georgia may never beat Alabama while Nick Saban is walking the sidelines in Tuscaloosa. I think it's the perfect spot to buy low on Georgia. I think they'll make some of the adjustments, and I really believe Georgia gets over the hump. Although I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit nervous that Nick Saban shows up in a bomber jacket. That screams confidence. That screams 1980s movie vibe. And anytime you see Nick Saban dressing that way or coming out of character, he may have a ace up his sleeve that the Georgia Bulldogs are going to have to deal with.